What am I doing here? Okay. There we go. One more look at this. All right, I think we can get started. Let me open my chat box up first. All right, I have another example, another merger example, and we'll start that. So I'll put this down. All right, here's what we know about it. So let's do this. Let's go to Excel, open up a sheet, and if I were to say paste all that information into, say, this first cell, well, it would go all the way across, and I can't see about probably 50–60% of it. I can't even see. So one thing you can do, you've probably done this, but in case you haven't, if I go to insert and I grab what's called a text box, I can just size a text box here. Now these text boxes are handy as all get out, especially like if you do labels on graphs or something, you can set your labels in text box. All right, so now let's go back to the Word document, and let's just take what we need to know in order to work this example. Okay, let's copy this, and we'll drop it into this text box, and probably let's keep the source formatting. All right, and then let's, you don't have to, but I think I'm going to grab a different font and blow this one up quite a bit. So there's my comic. Let's go up to 14, 15, 16, something like that. 16, that'll work. That looks good. Okay, and I can pull this down a little bit. And now I'll just blow up my whole screen. There we go. Looks good. All right, so we have a acquiring company. And this could be anything from a manufacturer to a purely equity capital company. But their focus at this point is to acquire a company that we'll just call TAR, and that's the target of the acquisition. So ACQ is attempting to acquire TAR. Okay, and what do we know about TAR? They expect to pay $1 dividend. They have a 4% growth rate, and TAR is currently selling at $20 per share. All right. So before ACQ can make an offer, they have to value. They have to value the target. And so, well, okay. So what did we just learn? Maybe not that long ago, and that would be let's set up a free cash flow model, an economic profit model, one of those two. All right. In order to do that, we need a WACC, and all you have for information is what you see. So I don't have any financial statements. I can't estimate their free cash flows. I can't estimate their economic profit. I need a cost of capital of some kind. Well, do I have a beta? I don't have that. Do I have a risk-free rate? I don't have that. So what do we have? Well, we have all the parts of the constant dividend growth model in front of us. So let's do that. And let's start out with the company. And we have our two companies, and this would be ACQ. I'm gonna blow this up a little bit. It's still too small. Well, then I gotta shrink this, don't I? All right, all right. Well, we'll work around this somehow. Let's make this a little fat. See if that works. Oh yeah, there we go. All right. So the company ACQ, the other one is TAR. All right, and let's underline these, and maybe we'll center them, make them look nice. Okay, so let's start out with the price. Oops. Now, one little thing I do when I, cut and paste things into an Excel file, how do I know what was mine? What did, if you come back to look at it later, you got to ask yourself, what did I do on here? And what did I just simply download? Well, what I generally do is, I do everything in lowercase. That's my own. That's original. And I know that I did this. Okay, so this part's all given. So our price says that it's selling for $100, and TAR is currently selling for 20. We have shares, and ACQ has 1.5 million. Always use commas. You're dealing with millions, no pennies. And TAR is 500,000. All right, and let's continue with what we know. Next, dividend. We know target will be doing $1. And let's do the growth rate. All right. They're currently growing at 4%. So this $20 share price is based on a growth rate of 4%. Now, AECQ believes it can increase the growth to 7%. So you have to be careful which one you use when you start. So we're going to start out with 4% because that's the basis for pricing TAR at $20. So let's see if we can get an R for it then. All right, and we'll just use the model R equals D1 divided by P0 plus G. All right, so let's try it. Equals D1 divided by P0 plus G. And we're using the 4%, not the post-merger, 7%. All right. So this is, I'm just trying to back out what is the market capitalizing the dividend stream. What rate are they using to capitalize the dividend stream of TAR? And it appears they're using 9%. You see, I don't have a beta here. I don't have a risk-free rate. You just have to use the information that you have. All right, so let's continue. So let's value TAR with G equals 7%. What would this TAR be worth to ACQ if they could acquire the assets of the company, or just acquire the company, and grow it at 7%? Let's see how we do. So, and we'll use the same model that we have up here, only we'll solve it for the price. All right. So we have D1 divided by R. Yeah, R minus. I guess I don't know. I didn't use this as a. I should keep that separate probably. Yeah, this will work. So it's worth $50. If they can grow, if ACQ can grow TAR at 7%, it's worth $50 a share to them. All right. So now let's analyze the merger. And okay, it's worth 50. They would be well served not to offer $50. So let's just say they offer, and in my example, you could put any number you want in there. But I said, let's make sure it happens. So we're going to offer 45. So let's start out with a cash offer, and ACQ offers shares of TAR. All right. So we'll go through. This is, if you want to follow this kind of analysis in your book, this is how they do it. And I don't have any issue with it. There's some things that we can do in addition to what's in the book, and we'll get to those. But their notations are this. They say V, and then they'll say ACQ plus TAR. All right. Now, so in other words, they have both the companies. Oops, that's not quite what I wanted. Have both the companies inside the parentheses. Okay, so that's the value merged. Compared to if they do this. So if they do value ACQ plus value TAR. Okay, so let's open this up just a little if we could. All right, so if you want to make a note over here, I guess we could do that. The first one was the value merged. And this second one is the combined value operated. Operate as separate companies. As separate company. There you go. Okay, so let's do these numbers. So the value merged, you would have 500,000 shares that we were valuing at $50 per share, plus 1.5 million shares, which have a value of $100 per share. So let's add those together. So we'll do the $100 per share times the 1.5 million shares, plus we'll do the 50 million or $50 per share times the 500,000 shares. And of course, you always want to use a comma format when you're doing millions. Do I have 175 million? So 17.5 million. What do I have here? You know, so it's nice to have. And then, you know, if you want, you could do this too. I can insert a row here, and let's say market value. So that's the current market value. So this is what always number of shares times the price. And we'll do the same thing for this one. All right. So if we operate these as separate companies, what are they worth together? They would be worth 160 million, wouldn't they? So operated separately, not merged. And whatever the ACQ managers believe they could do with TAR if they owned it, well, unless they merge, they don't have that ability to, excuse me, to increase the value of TAR. So we just have what's currently available in the market. Okay, so this is their total market capitalization. So if you look that up and say finance.yahoo.com, they'll have a number in there. They'll call it market capitalization, and that's basically just the shares times the price per share. All right. So, we're lighting up here. What am I getting here? Come on, go. Could I show cell C19? I could do that. Let's see if I can do that. C19, yes. Yes. Okay. Now this again is the value if they're merged. So if merged, TAR becomes worth $50 a share to ACQ. So just from ACQ's perspective only, not anybody else on the planet, ACQ's perspective only, they're worth $50 a share times 500,000 shares. Then they have their own 100 million and a half shares, which have a current price of $100 per share, giving us a total of 175 million. Is that what we wanted? Okay, thank you. All right, very good. Let's keep going. All right. Now the value operated as separate companies, no synergies, just what they're worth today as separate companies, or they're worth 160 million. So your book and your upcoming assignment, they're going to ask you to calculate the gain from the merger. And that's just the difference between the merged value and the operating as separate entities value. So let's do that. We'll just subtract one from the other. Okay, so there's a $15 million gain in value. All right, and then your authors will ask you to calculate the cost of the merger. All right. And the cost of the merger, you can view that simply as how much did they overpay for this company? How much did they overpay? Well, what did they do? They purchased a $20 asset. So if one of us were to purchase a share of TAR, we would pay $20, wouldn't we? Okay, so ACQ is offering a huge premium to perhaps assure that this goes through. So they're overpaying by $25 a share, aren't they? So the cost will be, you're buying a $20 asset minus what are you paying for it? You're offering 45. Right. And then times how many shares are you buying? So I'm going to lose $25 a share on 500,000 shares, aren't I? There you go. All right, so this is where your authors stop. All right, and I think there's actually one more useful step here. And I mean, it seems obvious to me. And they don't have anything like this. They don't give it a name like this. But what if we call this the net gain? What would that give us? Well, we'll just add the two together. Ooh, how'd that happen? And the net gain, so they gained 15 million. It cost them 12.5 million to gain 15 million. Therefore, they're ahead 2.5 million. Okay, this type of number is not in your text, but I think it's useful. Why? Well, what's the gain per share? Well, this $2.5 million of extra value is distributed evenly across 1.5 million shares, isn't it? Okay, so let's divide that by the number of shares. Okay, so let's make sure we understand what's happened so far. ACQ offers TAR $45 a share for all of their shares. And let's assume it's accepted. The offer is accepted. TAR no longer exists. Okay. And what happened to the former shareholders of TAR? Well, there was a rock song years ago, and one of the verses was take the money and run. And that's pretty much what will happen to TAR's shareholders. They will take their $45 a share and they're done. They have nothing to do with ACQ anymore. Okay, but what happened to the 1.5 million current ACQ shareholders? What's the wealth effect for them? Well, they gained $1.67 per share, right? So what should their share value be? Well, before this all started, they were worth $100 per share. And now they gain an extra $1.50, or $1.67. So now they're worth 101,667. And I don't know why you can't do it this way. That's seems to work. All right, now this is how your text would do it. So let's do a formal wealth effect. And let's see. So ACQ or TAR is pretty easy. They gained what? They received $45 a share for shares that were worth $20, and they did this for 500,000 shares. So that one's pretty easy. So they gained 12.5 million. Okay, what's the wealth effect on the ACQ shareholders? All right, now since there's a synergy here, this is not a direct transfer. Okay, the gain for one party is not necessarily the loss for the other. Okay, but let's do ACQ shareholders. Okay, so after this merger, they are worth how much per share? Or let's just say let's do it on a gross basis. What's the company worth? Well, it's worth 175 million. Okay, and let's go back up a little bit here. What were they worth before the merger? They were worth 150 million, correct? So 100 times 1.5 million shares, right? 150 million they were worth prior to the acquisition or merger. Okay, so what did they pay to become worth 175 million? Well, let's subtract that. Minus, they paid $45 times 500,000 shares. Okay. So they're now worth 175 million. They paid $45 times 500,000 shares to be worth that. All right, and this is now all shared amongst how many shares? So divided among here's you got to be careful. You don't add those 500,000 shares of TAR to this, right? TAR no longer exists. Their shares don't exist. Nothing about them exists. Their assets now belong to the ACQ company, right? So we're going to do still have 1.5 million existing ACQ shareholders, or shares, not shareholders, shares. So there we go. So So 1.5 million, and when you do this, you get 101.67. So there you go. And if you want, we can formalize this totally. So it equals, this is what they're now worth. And let's put that in parentheses. We're kind of going a full circle here. So this is what they're worth today. They were worth $100 per share. And I'm pointing to this instead of typing it so that we get it down to the exact dollar. Times 1.5 shares. So they gained $2.5 million. And where have we seen that before? Well, it's right here, right? Okay. So that pretty much covers now this is a cash offer, right? This is a cash offer. And again, once this is complete, then the former TAR shareholders have $45 for each share of TAR that they formerly owned. They now have no shares of TAR. They have no shares of ACQ. They have $45 for each share they once had. Right. Oh, we lit up. Let me see what we have here. Can you do sell C29 one more time? I can try. C29. Yeah. Well, let's do it again. This won't quite be as accurate. I'm going to type the whole thing in so you can see the whole equation. Okay. Excuse me. So they're now worth 101.6. And if I say 67, I'm going to be off a little bit. Oh, that's good enough. So that would probably be what we'd see in the, in some, from some site that quoted their price. All right. So this is what they're now worth. Pre-merger, they were worth $100 a share. And this is times the number of shares they have. Might be a few pennies off here. Won't quite be exactly 2.5 million, but it'll be pretty close. Yeah, see, I rounded up, so it comes up a little higher, doesn't it? But you get the idea here. Let me just put a space in here. Then you can see. There you go. You see, we just did a full circle, right? We up here said to ourselves that we gained $2.5 million. We split that among 1.5 million shares. Right? That's our 1.5 million shares. And so we said that we'd be worth $100 plus this extra 1.666667 or 101.667. So we just kind of went full circle of what we already knew. Is that a little more clear? Okay, thank you. Okay, can you do C29? Okay, that's what I did. Is that a former question? Maybe I just missed that. Yeah, okay, I think we're good. All right. Let's move on now. Let's see what the Word document would ask us to do. Okay, we did all this, All right. We did the gain, we did all the good stuff. Okay. All right. Let's do a what if. All right, and here's our what if. Okay, let's do the wealth effects. All right. So let's start out. What's the value? Again, I think the best way to do these is let's find the price. So if it turns out that ACQ can grow TAR at only 4%, and it'd take the market little while to see that, but maybe not real long. You get some analysts who've been tracking both companies and they finally say, they can't do that. And it turns out that they couldn't. So let's say the 4% is there. How would the market adjust the price on ACQ? Keep in mind, TAR doesn't exist anymore. All right. So let's do the value merge. And work with the assumption of G is 4%. Okay, so what's the value merge? Well, we have that. So let's use some calculations that we've done formally. And so that would be this number right here. It's 160 million, isn't it? All right. So they're worth no more than they would be as separate companies. All right. All right. And how many shares do we have? Well, first of all, before we get into that, let's say, let's go back to the way they did in the book. Did I go through that? Okay, I did that. Okay, yeah, here we are. You know what? I'm going to make a copy of this so we can see it. Since I worked it by hand anyway. All right, let's put a space in it. Okay. What did we do here? They grew in value from 150 million to 175 million, but in order to do that, they paid $45 a share for TAR's 500,000 shares. So we did that. Okay, this time we can repeat this calculation, except that the value didn't increase to 175 to 175 million. It increased to only 160 million. All right. So let's do that. So here's 160 million. And let's take out what we paid for TAR. And that would be, it's the same offer, so we haven't changed that, $45 a share times 500,000 shares. That's the 22.5 million. Okay, so what is the value of ACQ? Or value, let's do value post-merger. All right, so just subtract what they're worth minus what they paid to be worth that. And now they're worth 137,500. Right, and how many shares do we have in well, there's a cash offer. The offer didn't affect the number of shares. They still have their original 1.5 million shares. So let's get our share price. Once the market digests all this information, they will see 1.5 million shares with a value total of 137,500 and so on. So let's get a share price. So 91,66667. All right. And it's pretty easy to see the wealth effects. I mean, obviously, you can do it so many ways. Let's start out with I'm talking about it's easy to see. It's not as obvious for the former TAR shareholders, but let's go through with with the, well, actually, that's the easiest one. So the wealth effects. How about TAR? How does that affect their wealth? Not a bit. They still have just received $45 a share for their shares that are worth $20, and times 500,000 shares. So yeah, take the money and run. They're done. They have $12.5 million more than they had before this, regardless of what happens to their former assets. All right, how about ACQ? We already know the number, I'm pretty sure. Is this their post-merger value? Yes. What was their pre-merger value? Well, they had $100 per share, 1.5 million shares, so it must have been 150 million. So you can see that they lost well, look at that. So now we have, since there's no synergies developed, now we're back to the situation in which the gain for one company is a loss for the other. All right. So we can also do the wealth effects are pretty, if we already have the price, then it's pretty easy to see. So we can say equals, the other way to do this, of course, since you already did the price, you can say that they've closed at 91.67. They were formerly $100. And this is times 1.5 million shares. So there you go. They lost 1.5 million. Let's do this again. Oops. That'll get you pretty close. Yeah. So they lost, was that 833 a share? All right. And the ACQ or TAR is out of it completely. Those shareholders, again, regardless of what happens to the merged company, they left. They're gone. They took $45 a share and ran. They're not around anymore. Now, what happens if TAR can grow their assets at 8%? At 8%. Well, that doesn't affect them either, does it? They're out of it, one way or the other. For better or for worse, they're out of it. All right, let's do another scenario. I think this is the next one in the Word document, and that would be, let's convert this to a share offer. Let's do max shares to TAR for ACQ price to remain at $100 per share. Okay. So let's do a share offer. And if you could convince TAR shareholders to go along with this, you'll see that, I mean, they'll still benefit from it, but it won't cost them as the $45 share offer did. Let's see how it won't cost the ACQ as much to pull off. In fact, they won't lose anything, will they? So let's try it. All right, what's the value? Okay, let me go back just a moment. Let's start out here. We're going to do this two ways, actually. And let's start out with G of TAR equal to 7%. We will change that back to 4 eventually, but we'll just start out now. Let's say it all works. Okay, so what's our value merged? Under the assumption that ACQ can grow TAR at 7%. We've done that. Let's just go back up and get it. We know that it's worth 175 million, isn't it? So we can do that. Let's just go get it. All right. And then this is the value merged. And what outcome is what's our target outcome here? Well, that would be share value. Well, our goal, or TAR, or ACQ's goal, is to maintain their $100 per share. So what's the implied number of shares? Number of shares that would accomplish this? Okay. So if you had $175 million in value, and you had 1.75 million shares, you would have your $100 per share, right? So what's our current number of shares? Well, that's given. We know that they have 1.5 million shares. So what can they offer to? They're going to make an offer to TAR, right? And of course, TAR will hold out for everything they can, and so come to a point where ACQ will no longer what they call sweeten the offer. They'll stop at some point, and that would be the difference here. Oops. So they will. Oh, great. What have I done? Let's start over. All right. So they offer them a maximum of 250,000 shares of ACQ stock for the 500,000 shares of TAR. So let's try it once. So we're going to equals. So let's let me label this first. All right. So they will offer oh, excuse me, sorry. They will offer 250,000 shares of ACQ for the 500,000 shares of TAR. All right. And so if you create a ratio here, so that would be what? Half a share of ACQ per share of TAR. So that's your exchange ratio. Half a share of ACQ for each share of TAR. Or if you want to look at it another way, what else could we say? 1 share of TAR, I'm sorry, 1 share of ACQ for 2 shares of TAR. So your exchange ratio would be 1 share for every 2 shares. However you want to look at it. Okay. So let's do some wealth effects. All right, let's start with the one that's so difficult, and that would be the ACQ. I'm not being at all serious. What was the goal of this particular transaction? It was to maintain the $100 share price, wasn't it? So the wealth effects for the ACQ shareholders, let's maybe put that word in there. The wealth effect for the ACQ shareholders is zero. I can even type it in. The goal for this transaction was to maintain their $100 share price. All right, that's not so bad. Okay, then let's do the TAR shareholders. The TAR shareholders. All right, let's do the two steps. What did they receive? They received 250,000 shares, which will trade at a value of $100 per share. That was the goal of this. Correct? All right, and what did they give up? Well, they gave up their 500,000 shares, which were worth $20 a share. So you got to be real careful with these. Which shares are which shares, which price attaches to which share. Yeah. So they are surrendering their 500,000 shares that have a value of $20 per share. So they're receiving 250,000 shares that will have a value of $100 per share in exchange for 500,000 shares, which have a value of $20 per share. So their gain will be the difference. They gained $15 million. So that worked out pretty well, didn't it? Now let's go through the synergy did not occur, and therefore, let's do a what if. Let's say a TAR. All right, let's just take a quick glance at the without having them in front of us, the financial statements of ACQ. Let's say they did this cash offer, and what happens to to their balance sheet? Well, they take $45 a share. So let's just look at both the balance sheet. Let's go to the cash offer to start out with, and we can do the share offer if we want. But this should explain it. Their cash is reduced by $45 a share times 500,000 shares, right? So that's your effect on the left side. So actually, you're minus this, aren't you? So the left side of the balance sheet goes down by 22,500. right? So if they take in stock, that's worth what? They take in stock, that's worth. So in other words, your cash is down by this much. What are your assets worth now? Well, they took in $20 times 500,000, and you have to value it still, but nonetheless, they're basically $10 million bigger, and they paid 22. Well, okay, the market doesn't know that they believe it's worth $50 a share, right? Market doesn't know that, but they believe in the long run they will be worth more than they paid. The TAR assets will be worth more than the ACQ company paid for them. So what happens if your cash goes down by 22,500 and your assets go up by 10 million? Where do you make up the difference? Well, you have to write that off on your equity account, don't you? And what do you do on the where else do you capture that difference? Well, this would be what you call goodwill. So you record this as that difference as goodwill, because this is value that I expect to recapture in the future. All right. So we'd have $10,000 worth of assets, and what would the difference be? I'm sorry, $10 million worth of additional assets, and then we would have the difference there, $12,500,000 worth of additional goodwill. And then if over time we find that this we can't grow TAR, they can't grow TAR at 7%, well, then they may have to write down some of that goodwill. All right. So it's all kind of complicated, and that part is why we have accountants, right? And that's not me. All right, so let's continue here. We just did a share offer, gave them 250,000 shares of so if you're the ACQ company, you just gave TAR shareholders 250,000 shares of your stock for their 500,000 shares. All right. So let's do the wealth effects. This one's not so simple. All right. Let's start out with ACQ. All right. If TAR assets, and so in other words, if ACQ can only grow or can grow TAR at only 4%, what's the combined value of the two companies now? So let's say combined value. We've done this before, so let's not redo it. It's basically the same as if they operated as separate entities. That would still be the 160 million, right? We did that up here. It would just be, the number of shares times the price plus the number of shares times the price. So they will be worth $160 million. Okay. And how many shares do they now have? Well, they have 1.5 million they had before the merger, plus 250,000 or 250,000 more shares. Okay. And so what does that come out as value per share? And let's not forget our commas. Divide the value by the number of shares. And we get a price of $91.43 per share. All right. So now we can go through our wealth effects. So this is pretty easy. Once you have this, now let's go through ACQ. So well, before this share offer, they had shares that were worth $100 per share. And they had 1.5 million shares. Okay, so now they're worth $91.67. They still have their original 1.5 million shares. Do I have enough zeros here? Let's see. Comma. So 1,500. Yep, looks good. All right. So they lost. They lost 12,857,143. All right, let's see the wealth effects for TAR shareholders. Let's go to the two steps. Let's ask first, what did they receive? They received 250,000 shares, and these shares should value at $91.43. All right. And what did they give up? What did they give up? Well, they gave all their shares. They gave up their $20 per share times their 500,000 shares. So they're, you almost call it a notional gain. I mean, this is what it's worth. I mean, unless you sell your stock, you don't actually realize this gain. It's not a realized gain, but notional value, in other words, paper value, they're up what? And since we had no synergy, what did we just see happen? We transferred $12,857,143 of wealth from the former ACQ, or I should say the current, or the current ACQ shareholders, to the new ACQ shareholders, who were the former TAR shareholders. So in other words, the ACQ shareholders transferred $12,857,143 of their wealth to the new ACQ shareholders. Right? And you have to be very careful in watching which shares you're dealing with and what price you're dealing with. It's actually a fairly complicated process. I was, pricing these mergers is somewhat similar to an IPO. In other words, when an IPO comes out, that's an initial public offering. So you could take a company which was, say, bought out by an equity capital firm. So what does the equity capital firm do? They own it for a while. They tweak the management. They do a few things to it. Now they think it's worth more than when they took it private. So the equity capital company buys all the stock of the company, takes it private. Now they own it, and they make what they consider necessary changes in the management and the whatever else, and they have it, if you want to look at it this way, turn around and now they will sell it back to the public and try to realize their gain. Well, in our faculty, many, many, many years ago, we had a professor, and his nickname was Dr. IPO. So he traded these initial public offerings. He bought them and then, of course, sold them shortly thereafter. And from what I could tell, it seems like he was making more money from that than he was from his salary. Of course, back then it wasn't hard to beat our salaries. But anyway, he came to my office and we were just talking, and I said, hey, you got any IPOs that I could, you know, I'm kind of being cocky. Do you have any IPOs that I can be part of? And he says, oh, I've got a good one for you. It's Duracell. I said, okay, Duracell. And what about it? And he says, well, he showed me the, you know, the red herring. That's the prospectus or the offer price on it. And it would be initially offered to the public at $17.50 a share. So I looked at it and I said, okay, thank you. Why should I buy Duracell? He said, he looked at me just like, you know, just like a Western gunslinger looking at somebody who's about to shoot, looked me in the eyes and said, in a deep voice, it will not trade under $20. He had all kinds of models that he used. He did research. He did this day and night. I mean, so he made money from this. It was because of his own work. I'm not saying he got it illicitly in any way. He just studied these things up and down. Anyway, so I said, okay, I'll do it. So I called his broker and I said, could I have 100 shares? And back then you had to buy round lots. So a round lot was 100 shares. And, you know, so 100 shares times 1750, you know, that's a little bit of money. That's going to be a pretty decent sum of money coming from me, at least. So I said, okay, I'll take 100 shares. And the broker said, I'm fully sold out. So what happens is you get the bank underwriter distributes these shares across all these other members of their, what they call it, and then they try to distribute the shares and sell them. Well, the underwriter can do it on two different bases. One is best efforts, and the other is a firm offer. Well, they try for the firm offer and they try to negotiate as low as possible, because any shares that don't sell, they belong to that bank underwriter. Okay, so say Morgan Stanley decides to take Duracell public, and if it's split among those who are in the syndicate. But let's just, to keep it simple, let's say they didn't have a syndicate, they did it all themselves. Well, any shares of Duracell that don't sell, Morgan Stanley owns them. So they try to keep that price down. You know, obviously Duracell's management would like it to be as high as possible. So, but anyway, I think it was with a private equity firm, I should say, tried to get that price. Well, anyway, they settled at 1750. I don't know exactly how they did it. And so I couldn't get in, though. I was too late. So I asked the guy, well, can you call me tomorrow when the first trade is executed and give me the best price I can get tomorrow? And so, you know, promptly at 9 o'clock Central Time, I got a call from the broker, and he says, I can get you in at $21. And I said, oh, wait a minute now. My Dr. IPO says it's 20, but he didn't say 21. So I of course got gun shy, because, you know, some of these can just go down as fast as they go up. They're mispriced, they go down. So I said, I think I'll pass. So I passed. And that was such a good idea, because by the end of the week, the price was up to 28. Yeah, that was a real good idea. And by the end of the next week, it was up to 42, I believe, or 2 weeks, it was up to 42. And I could have got in at 21. Okay, that's me. But anyway, I read a review of this little thing, and what do you think of the underwriters? How good of a job did they do for that company? And one of the equity managers or somebody says, our underwriter did a wonderful job. We've driven the price up from 17.5 all the way up to 48 or 42 in just 3 weeks. Okay, just a little bit of common sense. What did Duracell owners do to make it worth about $20 more a share in 3 weeks? They didn't do anything. So basically, they sold a 28 sold dollar, 40 even dollar asset for 17.50. Yeah, so you got to be, so these mergers and these IPOs are just incredibly difficult things to price, but we're just going through the bare minimums here. I guess if this were an actual company that we were dealing with today, all your time and effort would be going into valuing the target. And you might be wrong, but that's just what it is. All right, so these are kind of the questions you have to answer for your assignment. And let's go back to the Word document for just a moment, if we could. Make sure I didn't skip anything. I'm pretty sure I didn't. Yeah, there it is. Yep, there's our number. And there's their loss. So it looks like we got everything in here. Okay. So your assignment is problems. There's questions 12 and 13 from chapter 31. My recollection is that question 12 is very similar to what we did today. And question 13 is very similar to what we did last Thursday. For chapter 13, that's chapter, what am I saying? For problem or question 13, the authors ask you to fill in a table. All right. In order to fill in that table, I'll just give you a hint. Start from the bottom. It seems to me you normally start at the top. They give you the first number. I believe it's similar to what I did on this past Thursday. And I think I did a price of $250, I believe. They're going to do $267 a share. So it's the same kind of a thing. And they'll tell you that immediately. But then all the other numbers in the table, you have to calculate. And you need the numbers at the bottom of the table before you can do some of those at the top. So start at the bottom of the table. And I think the rest should go pretty well. Okay, on Thursday, I will begin class will begin at 11, but I will not start my part of it until 11:15. The first 15 minutes we will dedicate to the evaluations, and you should get an email with a link which will allow you to conduct the evaluations. So we will, or you will, I won't, spend the first 15 minutes. I'll start at, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. At 12:45, I'll begin. I'm thinking of the other section. I'll begin at 12:45, so 15 minutes into class, I will begin. I'll go through questions 12 and 13 from chapter 31, and then we'll do a review for the final, which will include reviewing what I would expect you to know on mergers and on leases. So your final exam will just have 2 topics, leases and mergers. It's not comprehensive, but you can still have the full 2 hours to complete it. And I'll go through a little bit more of the details on Thursday. So as of now, I think we are done with what I'd like to try to accomplish today. And so I'll check in here real quick and ask, do we have any, did I answer this? Let's go back to that if I can. I wonder why that didn't light up. Okay, did I answer that already? Let's see, let me go back. Okay, I did see 29. Okay, so Was the cell C50 offered to TAR? Cell C50. Yes. But it's the number of shares. It's not the dollar offer. It's the number of shares. Yes, it is. That's the number of shares to TAR. Oh, sorry. It's the number. Oh my gosh, how did that work? Okay, try it again. Oh, you got it. Okay, sounds good. Very good. It was the number of shares offered, not the dollar amount. Anything else I can answer before we go? Hmm. Any other questions that I can answer? Be very glad to help you with anything. And again, you should find that the questions that I've assigned, number 12 and number 13, are very similar to the two examples that we worked, including last Thursday and today. So it should be okay. I know we went through them rather quickly. We lost that day to the wellness, which kind of put us behind a little bit, but I think we're all right. You should be all right. And I'll be available during my office hours tomorrow if you have any questions. All right, so I'm going to head out. All right. So long.